I'm Pamela Rickia from livingjoyfully.ca, and today I'm here with Zach and Heather Lake. Hi, guys.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Heather has been on the podcast before, and she shared with us about her deschooling journey. And later on in our conversation, like when we were chatting after, she mentioned that her husband has had quite a journey as well. And as that kind of percolated in my mind, I thought it would be really interesting to have them on together to talk about the journey from both of their perspectives. So to get us started, Zach, can you just give us a quick reintroduction to you and your family?
Sure, I'm Zach, and this is my wife, Heather, and we have 4 children. Gavin, age 17, Brenna, 14, Hattie, 6, and Logan is 3. We live in Omaha, Nebraska, and we've been unschooling for 18 months.
Oh, that's awesome. So if I remember from Heather's interview, it was initially your son Gavin's idea for homeschooling, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I was wondering what each of your reactions were right at that, that very first moment.
Yeah. So just a little background. Gavin is 17 now. He was always like such a bright, curious kid who loved to learn, but never fit in the school box very well at all. So it was a very frustrating experience for him. He was very bored and did not enjoy learning what other people told him that he should be. He loved learning what he was interested in, but was not interested in kind of that checklist of things that you're supposed to learn for school. So he'd always been really unhappy in school, and the teachers were really frustrated with him too because he didn't fit in the box very well. So some of his teachers were really unkind to him, and it was really uncomfortable for us and really uncomfortable for Gavin. It just didn't work well all the way around. So I think somewhere like middle school was really hard with Gavin because I think as they get older, the teachers had less patience for someone who didn't fit in the box very well.
Yeah.
And he was really, really struggling. So at some point, Zach and I were talking and we're like, at some point homeschooling might be a better option for him, but he wasn't really interested in at the time in that. So we just kind of like tucked it back in our brains,
Right.
And when Gavin was 15, him and I had gone to a movie together, and he just like started falling in love with movies and writing. He got really inspired to write movies and really get involved in filmmaking. And so at that time, I think, was he a freshman in high school? I think he was.
Yeah.
And so I had looked around to see what opportunities were in Omaha for filmmaking. And there was this film festival coming up. And so he got really excited about that. We took him out of school to do that. And they had a special academy. And we just like saw him just like come alive during the film festival. He was so excited. And just, he'd be there all day and just was so like a smile on his face the whole time. And we were just like, wow. So he's like really found a passion, and he just like took off with it, just was writing all the time, meeting people in Omaha who were making movies, going to festivals. And it really became like school started interfering with his learning about the movie making process.
Yeah.
So he'd gone to a film festival, and I picked him up. We were on our way home, and he said, I don't want to do school anymore. And we're like, it was just me. It was just me in the car. And I was like, okay. So I was kind of glad I had that kind of tucked back in my head. So, because I wasn't entirely shocked, I guess, or I kind of could respond to that. So I said, well, how about homeschooling? And he was like, okay, yeah, let's homeschool. He was ready to take off and go. So then we get home, and like I was gonna like talk to Zach, a little bit, like, hey, we've kind of had this conversation.
Work me in a little bit.
Yeah, and Gavin like walks in the door, and he's like, Dad, we're gonna homeschool. And Zach's like, oh, okay, So I think like my initial reactions when I look back on that time, I was very excited for him. Like I felt like it was a good thing, but there was also another side of me that's like, what are we doing? Like, are we totally crazy to like totally leave school? And so I kind of wondered if it was the right thing to do. But I also, like, honestly, I had so much relief for Gavin because I felt like he had this passion that he wanted to pursue, and now he'd have the time to just work on it all the time. And I was happy that he would be in a more nurturing environment where school, the teachers weren't very kind to him sometimes. So I had relief that he was kind of out of that system and going to be home with us, So I don't know. What did you think?
When he walked in the door.
Well, so my initial reaction was more of fear, disbelief a little bit, not quite sure how this whole thing's going to work out. Heather and I talked about it, like she said, in the past, but it was always very, very surface, just thrown out there. Hey, maybe we can homeschool sometime. It's like, yeah, maybe we can. That's fine. And then we talk about something else and not really give a second thought. But no, so I was hesitant, and I was the reluctant spouse, which I think is kind of the theme of this, initially anyway, for sure. And it was just, I don't know, I guess fear was the biggest factor there. So.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense. I mean,
big change.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge change, right? So how long, what did you like pull him out almost immediately, or?
That was like in October, that film festival. So he actually, at Christmas break, we stopped then. And I
was wanting to tap on the brakes and push it through a little bit slower.
The end of the school year?
But we didn't. So
yeah, he was more interested in kind of waiting, I think, like finish out the school year. But I guess I got pretty excited. So I was kind of ready for Christmas break. And then my teenager, Brenna, my 13-year-old at the time, she decided to, because really it was just about Gavin at first. And then Brenna got kind of excited, and she's like, she wanted to try it out too. So at the winter break, we started homeschooling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was even more hesitant with her than I was him. So
yeah.
Just because he didn't fit in the mold. She fit more in the mold.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. So between October and December, Heather, were you busily learning all about homeschooling?
Oh my gosh, yes. I just like dove into it, and like, cause I had no idea about homeschooling. Like I'd had friends that homeschooled and a friend that had unschooled, but I really honestly didn't know very much about it at all. So I went to Facebook and followed like every model of homeschooling there is. I joined like the local Facebook pages and the local groups, and I just kind of like started absorbing information. Yeah. I have a friend who was a long-term unschooler, my friend Tracy Simmons, and she was super helpful. And that was one of the best ways to get information, was talking to her, just person to person, especially because I knew her kids and how great they were. She had 2 at the time that were transitioning to college. And so that was nice to just kind of talk about like the long-term view. And she was really patient with me and nice, because I would ask questions all the time, like, how does this part work? And how does this work? And it was
all those early questions, right?
Yeah. I mean, the same questions everyone has at the beginning. And, I just read a lot of articles, and I read Blake Bowles has a book, College Without High School, that I really enjoyed. And so, yeah, I just kind of just started reading everything I could get my hands on.
And what about you, Zach?
So most of my learning actually came from Heather. I mean, she would pass me. And she's kind of almost being humble, because when she dives into something, she dives into it. She every day she's rattling off new articles or new quotes or new whatever she learned. And so she would share websites with me. She would share articles and quotes and books and podcasts. All kinds of different things, different media for me to listen to or to read or whatever. And it slowly started making sense and things like that. But I mean, she probably, I don't know, would send me probably 5 things a day, at a minimum kind of thing. And it just, they would slowly start to strike different chords with me about, oh, maybe this is a different way to do things, or maybe this makes a little bit more sense. And I started warming up to it, I guess, at that point, because that was the whole point. That was the initial thought here was you got to get Zach warmed up a little bit before he goes. So.
Well, I'd be interested in knowing from both your perspectives how this information that Heather was sharing with you, how that kind of learning process went for you. So Heather, did you find over the course of sending him stuff, you said you sent a wide variety from books to blog posts to podcasts to all sorts of things. Did you find over time that you kind of settled into certain things? Or did you continue to just send everything that kind of came across your path that you thought he might be interested? I was just wondering how you kind of learned how to help him.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing I thought about when I was thinking back on our process is I just want to acknowledge it's really hard when one person in the couple gets super excited about something and you're reading and it's like, you're just like, my mind was being blown every day because school is just something that you think it just is what it is and it has to be that way. And I've never questioned really the school process that much. And I mean, I knew it didn't fit well for Gavin, but it just seems like he's just the outlier, so then when you start and so then when you start reading these articles, and you start to reevaluate the school model, it's like just kind of mind blowing. And every day you're really learning something new. And, I want to share that with him. And, sometimes that you just have to be patient because they're not in the same place, so you just have to be kind of patient and understand that even though you're really enthusiastic and excited, it's just going to take a little bit of time too for your spouse. But I think the biggest thing with sharing the articles, because you do run across so many good articles that start to help you take a critical view of school. And I would try to find 1 or 2 sentences or the heart of the article, the concept, and kind of cut and paste that, to a message. And then the best way, though, is the face-to-face conversations about those concepts.
Absolutely.
Because even if you read an article and you read something that really blows your mind, then when you sit down and talk about it, it expands your knowledge of that even further. So I think one of the best things that we did was just sit down and talk about different articles we'd read and just different concepts. One was just the grading system and what does it mean to be an A student or a C student? What does that mean? And does that mean that the A student understands more, or is it because they can memorize really well? So they're being rewarded because they can memorize really well. And so we would sit down and talk about that, and be like, oh my gosh, yeah, we never thought about it that way. And just to see those concepts, talking about the lack of outside play that even our kindergartner was getting or real world skills, to really think about, wow, kids go to school so early and they're just in that school setting, until they're 18, and going to college or career, or whatever. It's we were excited for the kids to live life with us and, just do things with us during the day that, and to learn that way. So it's really those face-to-face conversations about specific concepts that I think are really important. And I think what advice I would give to a spouse who has a reluctant spouse is you don't even necessarily have to label it as unschooling or feel like you have to jump from public school or traditional homeschooler to unschooling. I think sometimes, especially for a reluctant spouse, that's too much to process or something. And I think until you've done some deschooling, I think even the word unschooling can be a barrier to some people because it sounds like the word sounds like not learning because we're so used to school equaling learning. Mm-hmm. And so like now that we've like done a lot of deschooling, like that word, makes sense to us. But I think in the beginning, if you have a reluctant spouse, sometimes that word can cause concern or something.
Scary. Yeah, it's a scary word.
So we called it, so like I didn't even use that word with Zach for like a long time. Like we focus more on what we kind of call project-based learning. I think that word kind of conjures for people that kids are learning through doing, like hands-on. And I think it was easier to digest that word maybe at first, because he could get a feeling for what that was, that our kids were going to learn not from worksheets or someone lecturing them, but they were going to learn from doing. And just, I think so really, I guess what I'm saying is instead of trying to talk someone into like unschooling, I think your first priority needs to be about breaking down school.
Yeah, what school really is and things like that. And what you actually learn from school. And are grades important? And man, they're there from 8 to 3, but is that really the only time you can learn? Or do we learn after that? Or are they just, do kids not learn after that because they've had all the life sucked out of them for these last 7 hours of the day and stuff like that? So I think she's right. I think breaking down the what school is, helps tremendously.
Yeah, just taking a critical view of school, because we just don't do that. I mean, we just all accept it for what it is and don't question it. And then when you really start to break it down, I think it helps learning in a different way. It makes it easier once you start to understand that school isn't necessary and you don't have to learn like that. So, and then I think an important thing to share with him was, that unschooled kids can go on to college or careers or whatever they want to. I think we both felt like once we could feel like our kids could do what they wanted to, after the school years, that it just helps you take a deep breath and relax and really enjoy the process. So we talked a lot about that. We got together with other unschooling families in our area. We actually we have a parents meeting that we have every month. And so that's been a nice way just to see other parents who are doing it and get together and see how they interact with their kids. And that was really nice. And just to, share pictures and stories with your spouse from the day about the interesting and fun things that you're doing. It really helps them to see what a great way it is to learn. But I definitely think in the beginning, you have to remember that it's kind of a 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing for the person who's excited and for the reluctant person. Because when you're new to it, there's days where you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I love this so much. And then you have another day where you're like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Wait, is this okay? Is it okay to do this? And actually I had one of those days in the beginning, and I actually turned on one of your podcasts because I was like, oh my gosh, what are we doing here? Like, are we just totally insane here? But so not only for the enthusiastic person, but for, he was like, okay, he was looking at school and understanding the issues and the problems with school. And then he'd kind of get excited, but then there might be another day where he's like, okay, now what's going on here? Like, and so you just have to have a little grace for each other in that there's going to be days where you question in the beginning what you're doing, and there's going to be days where you're excited too. So.
I do love that word grace, to have that space for each other to have, to be free to express, right? Mm-hmm. Thoughts, concerns, right. and everything like that. And I love the idea of, it's really taking on the fact that learning about unschooling and moving to unschooling truly is a journey, right? It's not like, oh, we're going to do this and then boom, right?
Right.
Starting with, just starting to think critically about school itself. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's absolutely a great place to start, right? Because that's the whole point. First, you have to, start to understand what it is you're not liking about that before, and then, start talking about what you're going to replace that with.
Yeah, it's such a foreign concept to people. And it's like, unless you've probably been a unschooled kid, you probably have no idea what that even is. So you really have to break it down kind of to its simplest forms and figure out what do you really want out of schooling? I mean, what's the point of schooling is to learn how to function in society, right? And you can do that a lot of different ways. You don't have to just do it the way on this 8 to 3 time schedule, 9 months out of the year. There's so many different times you can do that.
So were there any times during this kind of learning process, especially up till he came home, where you felt kind of resistant to the information? You were talking about how, she was sharing stuff with you, and you guys were finding time for conversations here and there to chat about the stuff that she was sharing. I liked your idea about just sharing little snippets, right, Heather? Not whole big long article. Here, read these tombs before we talk.
Right.
So I'm just wondering, if you could share, if there were some things that, what was it overwhelming? Were there things that you specifically felt brought up more resistance than help, I guess I'm looking for?
Nothing that I don't think brought up more resistance. I think it's just such a process, and it's just something where it's like every day we'd have a conversation and we'd talk about whatever the hot topic of the day was, or whatever she learned about today was. And I would totally get it. And then the next day I'd have to go back to her and say, wait a second, but what about this? And how does that work again? And explain this to me, please. And every day she would. And she had a lot of patience with me, and as far as like, and I think she probably had patience with herself as well, because I'm sure, like she said, she had doubts as well, because it's such a foreign deal. But it's like her patience with me kind of allowed me to process my thought, get my thoughts in order, and understand more about what's going on and the differences that this could have on our lives and impact on our kids. And so I don't think there's anything that was that hindered that, I guess. I think you have lots of these times when you learn something and you get really excited, and then you feel dumb all of a sudden again the next day. And that's what's scary, is it's like, oh wait, I totally understood that yesterday, but now I don't get it again. And you just feel like it's, I don't know, like maybe you're crazy.
Well, I think that, I remember those moments, absolutely, right? And so I kept going every day, like you were doing, Heather, right? Every day you're going back to the information, because those connections, I think at first you have that aha moment, but it's so new, right? These are such new connections. You have to just keep making them over and over and over again till they finally stick. Yes, it's the only way I can kind of describe it. But that's learning in action, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's like you kind of build this framework, and you kind of have to layer on top of it. I remember from I think it was a podcast you had done with Sandra Dodd, and you talked about like a Polaroid picture, or something about like the color develops in a picture as you get more into unschooling. Yeah. And when I heard that, I'm like, yes, because you just kind of start with this framework, and you just start to layer on top of it. And then when then it's all kind of theory though, and concepts, but then you start to live it out, and you start to see it. And like you said, all those connections are coming together and making more sense, and they're just building on each other. And so it's just a long process. School is something that almost everyone thinks is just the way it is and the way it has to be. And so when you have a spouse who's not exactly on board right from the beginning, you just have to understand that's going to take time to learn more about and to build on that. And really, the concern from the reluctant parent, they just want to make sure their kids are okay. They want to make sure that their kids will have friends and be able to go on to what they want to do after school, whether it's college or something else. And so the reluctant spouse,
and they're not weird, and they're not socially inept and things like that, which is all the stigmas that come with someone being homeschooled. And it's like, that's so far from the truth. But it's like, that's the stigma that we all have in our brain, that's what happens when you're homeschooled, is that, oh, your kids are sheltered and they're in this bubble, and that, you know, they can't talk to adults, when it's actually they interact more with adults now than they ever did before. You know, yeah, they had a teacher, but now they're out in the real world interacting with adults on a daily basis, and having real conversations with them, and learning from different ways, and being curious and things like that. I don't know. It's just shattering that thought process that there's the only one way, and it's the way.
Well, because that's what we've grown up with, right? I mean, we've had 20, 30 years of that being the only way. So remembering that helps you realize how hard it can be to break through all of those different paradigms that we just think is the way human beings learn, and the way they learn how to become a functioning adult, right?
Well, I think you have to break through those paradigms for yourself. Then you have family and friends and coworkers and things like that all have those same fears that kind of feed the negativity back into you too. So it's not like you have to break through it one time. It's like you got to break through it multiple times before you kind of really sticks and stays with you.
You know, especially, I love that point, Zach, because, you know, as they say, to learn something really deeply is kind of to be able to share that information with someone else, right? So to help them learn it. So, you know, you can understand one thing, but that's totally different than being able to explain it to someone else. And then the excited parent is spending like all their time learning. And so often I find the reluctant spouse is the one that's not, is out working, or even, working at home, but has a lot of their hours dedicated to other things. So they also don't have the amount of time that the excited spouse, I like that, excited, the excited spouse has to dive into it all, right? So sometimes we can be so excited and we just want to pull them along. And why is this taking so long? Well, they don't have the time that we have to immerse ourselves in it as well, right?
Yeah, especially I think, as the excited spouse, when you join Facebook pages and the local groups and everything, you start getting a daily reassurance about the path,
Yeah.
So the excited spouse is getting that a lot, whereas, the person who is not looking at Facebook, pages all day is not getting that constant reassurance.
Well, and actually contrary to that, we're getting a lot of negative feedback from that.
Exactly. Oh, yeah.
And explain that this is where something you're thinking about doing, you're getting the negative side of that. And it's like, oh, your kid's going to be weird if you do that. And it's like, no, actually they're not.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I remember that with my husband as well, right? Because he's just making the initial connections, and then he goes out to work or out to meeting, and conversations come up, and then all the conventional messages come back, and then it's like you said, it's like starting again the next day, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think I would say to anybody who's skeptical or reluctant, like there's so many myths about homeschooling in general out there. And so I think for anyone who's skeptical or concerned about their kids, like just try to have an open mind and an open heart to it, because there are so many myths and misconceptions out there about homeschooling. And I think that if you can be open-minded and meet some other homeschoolers or unschoolers and some other families and do the research, like you'll really learn that those myths are really just not founded. Like the socialization question is I think one that is very concerning for families. And like every homeschooler I know is like, we have so much socialization that we're worn out, like there's so many different opportunities. And so even like the main, or like he said, that, kids won't be able to talk to adults or something. And it's like, our kids are out interacting with people like all the time, so there's just so many things that even if you have a concern in your heart for your kids about homeschooling or unschooling, it's worth it to do the research and to meet some other homeschool families to really start to break down the myths about homeschooling. And I think that'll help parents to feel more comfortable. in homeschooling.
Yeah, to at least just be open to learning more about it, right?
Yeah,
instead
absolutely.
of just letting the fears win and putting, thinking I need to put my foot down and not even open that door,
right.
That door.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm taking is the conversations were super helpful, like the sharing of information, but the conversations were super helpful, and and watching your kids. I heard you guys talking about that, starting to see it in action with your kids, and connecting and seeing other unschooling families. So were those kind of the extra helpful things?
Is that for me?
Yeah, sure. Yes. Helpful for you, Zach.
What helped you really see that it was a good fit?
Well, there's lots of things that actually, I guess, added to my belief. But I think some of the realizations on that is that when I think back on my education and what I did through school and things like that, I had roughly an hour and a half to 2 hour bus ride every day to school. I would do homework for that hour and a half or whatever I had to. I'd get home, late in the day, and I'd be exhausted. And we had these same conversations with our kids all the time about, Zach didn't turn his homework in. Well, neither did Gavin didn't turn his homework in either. So we had that. Brenna had tears in her eyes sometimes because she had so much homework. She was doing 47 long division problems because that's what her homework was. And it's like, do we need to do that much? And so all of a sudden all these synapses start firing, and it's like, maybe my childhood that I think was okay and was fine, actually my educational path, maybe it wasn't as great as I thought it was. And maybe there's actually a better way to do this, or at least a different concept on how maybe we can make that a better fit for my kids and make them more peaceful. And so the biggest change that we had was once we kind of took off that 8 to 3 type time frame again. It's like now they learn all day long. They go out into the world, they interact with everybody and do things they really love. Like Brenna loves to do art, so she takes an art class and she really kind of gets to dive deep into that. Gavin and his film thing he's just killing it in that. And he does great. And he makes movies. He writes scripts. He's down there probably right now. I guess he's not because we have his computer, but he's probably handwriting scripts downstairs because that's what he loves to do. And he just loves to do it. One of the things that stuck out the most to me though was Hattie, who's our 6-year-old, wants to be a vet when she grows up. And I don't know, that may be changes now. Now I think she wants to be a princess, but so she wanted to be a vet. So she would spend a lot of time watching these vet shows where they're doing surgeries and they're doing some very graphic things, and she's just enthralled in everything that they're doing. Wants to always constantly watch that. Watch that. We did another episode of that. And so Heather took it on kind of herself to get a dissection kit for her because Hattie was interested in doing things like that. So she got this dissection kit. We get a cow's eyeball. We get a sheep's brain. And Hattie is just, as close to these things as possible. She's cutting open the eyeball. She's looking at the different parts of the eyeball. And which obviously that makes my heart sing that she's that interested into it. And that there's an opportunity for her to do that at age 6. I mean, normally people wouldn't dissect until they're probably in middle school age is my guess. But what was even better than that was my 3-year-old was sitting right next to her, looking at the same stuff, trying to figure out what's going on in all these different body parts and just being interested and intrigued. And it's just, you can just see that flicker of a thought change into this fire, this flame, that burns. And I don't know, that's really cool to see that, to be able to witness that specific thing. So
yeah, just to be able to see the kids be able to really dive into what they're interested in and learn so much, I think was a big moment for him. So
yeah, I know that was something that really Me and you were talking about that a bit earlier, Heather, how when you start to understand the theory and then you start to see it in action, when you give them that space to just, find what they're interested and help them pursue it, and then just see them. I love the way you said that, the fire, right? The curiosity, the burning curiosity, right? That you just see them dive in with. That's so fun.
Yeah. But that's why it helps to break down the school model too, though, before, you kind of jump into it, because you start to see the world not in subjects. You start to understand that learning, isn't just divided into certain subjects, and learning doesn't just take place between certain hours. I think when we did the dissection, it was like a Saturday at 9:00 at night,
Yeah.
So breaking that down so that your expectations are different, than different than what they are in school. I mean, we had kids in school for 15 years. So, we have those expectations, but when you break down what learning actually looks like, you can start to see it all around you, that it's not like what it looks like for school. It looks like something different, but it's really cool. And then we got to share that together a lot, of like the cool things that the kids were doing, and how they were learning, and just seeing their brains so engaged in so many things.
And that's the other cool thing that happens too, is that you as the parents get to start learning again too, because they start asking you questions, and it's like, instead of just, passing it off, it's like you either have to figure it out, you have to know it, or you have to dive in there with them a little bit too. But then you can do the same thing. You can learn it. You can like a subject as well that maybe they're not interested in, but just say, hey, we're gonna have you pay attention to what we're doing here. And just, I think when you as a parent set that example for your kids that you like to learn too, and can learn at any age, and being
and we really set the intention at the beginning that one of our biggest goals was to have kids who enjoyed learning. Like, that was one of our highest priorities. It's like, it's not about, we want the kids to like be on this grade level, or we want them to meet some standard. It was really about, we want the kids to love learning and know how to learn, that if they have a question about something, it's like, hey, how do we find the answer to that? Or what's the best way to get that information? Because we just felt like that path for them would serve them their whole life, that they would, whatever they needed to know, if whether they're 5 or 15 or 50, that whatever they needed to know for their life to make their life more meaningful or more enjoyable, that they would be able to get that information. So that's we set that as our intention.
Yeah, they have the ability to do that. They have the ability to figure things out and desire it. I have the want to a little bit with it. So.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It's rekindling everybody's curiosity, right? And then it's just experience together, figuring stuff out. I remember it was like permission all of a sudden to be curious again and to admit I didn't know something and to just try and figure it out with them. It was such a big difference because, before you're like, I'm an adult, I'm supposed to, know everything I need to be an adult, and that's it. There was no value placed on anything else. And now it was like the world kind of opened up again.
I definitely experienced that, because I know, like, very early on, like, the kids ask me some question and I'm like, oh, I don't know the answer. And to me, that was like, I didn't learn it in school, so therefore I don't know the answer. And it was like, oh, okay, I can still be learning. Just because I graduated from college,
you're just done.
Doesn't mean I'm done with my knowledge. Like, it definitely sparked me to be more curious and really, like, when I pay attention to the kids, it's like what gets their brain engaged and invigorated. But I've started paying attention to that with myself, which I never really did before. Yeah. So it's like, if there is something going on that I'm curious about, or like I can feel like my brain, getting connected, I pursue it much more now than I did before, because I just see how much value that has, just have a more joyful life, and enjoy your life as much as you can. So.
That's very cool. Yeah, I love that. Now, Zach, I was wondering, you've shared lots of great stories and little revelations so far, but can you remember one, maybe that you haven't shared yet, that was a big kind of aha moment for you along the way, when that kind of unschooling puzzle piece fell in place for you?
Yeah, so I did think of one aha moment that because there's lots of them actually, and that's the wonderful thing about this.
Yeah, exactly.
All of a sudden, something makes sense again. It's like, okay, I buy that now. So, but the one I was going to share was that Gavin, our 17-year-old, he in middle school he was a wrestler. Okay, he's 14 years old, something like that. And he's a big kid. He's 6 foot tall. He's 180 pounds, 85 pounds, something like that.
Yeah.
And so he always wrestled in one of the higher weights up there, and he wrestled obviously against kids his height and weight and everything. And at the beginning of the wrestling matches, though, or when they do the duels between the two schools, it's like they kind of line them up on the mat, and it's almost like this triangle, that goes down. So it's like you got the big kid over here to the left, and you got this small kid over here on the right. So we're talking the kids that are a little bit bigger than Gavin. So, they're 6'3", 6'4", 250, and we go all the way down to like some 4.5 foot kid with like 70 pounds or something like that, And the amazing thing is that they're exactly the same age. They're all 14 years old, but they're completely different sizes. And it's like, so if you put this 80-pound kid against Gavin, Gavin would squash him because Gavin outweighs him by 100 pounds. And it just wouldn't be fair. And it's kind of absurd for us to assume that kid has the same physical attributes that Gavin would at that age. And so when you start flipping that script to the school side and you start thinking of, well, okay, but we all need to learn at the same pace. But it's like, well, no, because maybe our brains are developing at different periods. Maybe we're more interested in one thing today than we will be down the road or something like that. So it's like we have all this structure and everything else in our life, but we wouldn't have that for the wrestling mat. So why are we having that for school? It's why force these kids to do something that maybe they're not ready to do yet, or maybe some kids are way more ready to do something than the other kids. And so it's like, so we're just putting them all in this funnel and we're trying to make them all come out the same way. And it's like, that's not the way it works. It just wouldn't work out that way. So that's kind of I don't know. That was the one thing that really set it off. And I think I can describe that to other people because I have that visual in my head, I guess. So that helped me. So. Yeah,
because it's like you can see the external differences all at the same age, but just because you can't see the internal differences, like how they think and what they're interested in and curious about and how they like to learn, just because we can't see that, we assume everybody's the same, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I love that. That's great. Great analogy.
It just helps me make more sense of everything. But.
Yeah. All of a sudden, and you know what I love about, especially when I was learning about unschooling, because I always love from there observing and being with my kids, right? And hanging out and everybody's learning together. But for that, that first while I was heavily deschooling and figuring out and comparing everything to how they did it in school, right? How they learned and the time and all that kind of stuff. When you when you see what they do, what actions they take, what their next choice is, how they learn things, that's when you start those internal differences that you don't normally see. That's when they start to become more obvious, right? They start to come out and it's like, oh, that's how they personally put this connection together. And you can see how unique they are outside of that system that they're trying to fit into, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I think unschooling really helps you learn about not comparing kids to each other, especially based on age.
Yeah.
And I think one of the big moments for us was really realizing how arbitrary so many school things are, that like you're supposed to like read, when you're 5 or 6, and the kids who aren't reading by then, we feel like something's wrong with them when they're in the school system. But it's like, you really learn, like kids don't have to learn how to read when they're 5 or 6. Maybe they're going to be 7 or 8 or 9 or 10. or just the different like subjects that you learn in school. You just like, when you sit down to realize somebody just sat down at a table and decided that we're going to learn history this year. We're going to, it's like, you really realize that's just somebody sat down and decided that. And that doesn't, it's not the way it has to be. And if your child is behind, and I say it with quotes, what the school system says, that doesn't mean that they're behind. It just means they're not at the same what the school system is wanting. And so I think the unschooling really gives your kids the chance to just be themselves. And they can, nobody's behind or ahead or anything. They're just learning what they're interested about. It's really awesome to see.
Well, and to add on to that, she was talking about you have to read at a certain level at a certain time and things like that. And we're trying to catch all these kids up, that are a little bit behind. And basically what you're doing is you're sucking the fun out of learning to read for them. And you're making them feel inadequate, and so they're not very comfortable in school, or maybe they're more self-conscious about where they're at, and so when you take the fun out of it because they have to meet this certain level, that kind of that slows down the learning process for everybody. I don't know.
Yeah. And really, like you said, that the whole point, just that understanding how arbitrary it all is, and all you're doing is grading them against something arbitrary. So yeah, behind just has no meaning once you take that system out, right? Once you're not comparing, because it really doesn't matter if you learn about medieval times or how flight works, at one particular age, it really, or, these particular years of history.
Right.
I understand why they have those arbitrary lines in place is to, because teachers have to have you be able to read X number, however much you need to, or have to do the same math. But when you take them out of that element of the school and you don't put this pressure on them, it's amazing what they can do. I mean, kids are far more capable than we give them credit for.
And we were really interested for our kids, like we talked a lot about like the memorization aspect of school and how like for school, like, you're supposed to like memorize like what year the Civil War happened, but like what like value does that add to your life to have memorized that at some point, like when you were 15? Like that doesn't really, it just sucks a lot of resources out of you, to memorize stuff. But like we want our kids more to be able to discuss things. So if, the Civil War came up in conversation or something was on TV, we enjoy like having conversations about these kind of topics and talk about, okay, what did the Civil War mean, to our country? What does it mean now? What is, and to have those conversations, and we'll get in these like lively conversations. And to me, that's so much more important than that they know what year it happened, or they've memorized X, Y, Z, having those conversations is, and we all learn that way. I mean, Zach and I, we'll be all looking stuff up together and having those discussions. So that's been a really great thing.
And don't you find you learn so much from your kids now too?
Oh yeah. Yes. Yeah, we do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful. Just everybody's learning together, right? Okay, so last question. I was wondering for each of you, how does unschooling feel for you now? Like your comfort level, your lifestyle, how are you feeling when when you're having a conversation with someone, when you say you're unschooling or whatever, but really just in your days, just in your own days?
It feels like, so we've been unschooling now for 18 months. It just feels so natural to me now. Like it just feels normal, and we're just happy. The kids are so happy, and they're just playing and having a great time. And it just, like, I just have no questions or concerns or any doubts at all. Gavin, who's, the reason we really started out. So this coming fall should be his senior year in high school, but he was accepted into the Seattle Film Institute. So he's going to be moving to Seattle in August. Go to film school. So, and he's going for like I think it's a 13-month certificate program. So like by the time his like friends are graduating from high school, he's going to be done with his film school and, ready to move on to the next thing. So it's so cool to see it work out so well for him. And just all of our kids are so happy and pursuing lots of interesting things. So I feel really good about where we're at and like so grateful that we decided to unschool.
Yeah, I second everything that she said, but I feel a lot of pride actually is another adjective I'll throw out there. Just because I'm proud of what they're accomplishing. I'm eager to see kind of where they're gonna flow in the next phases of their life, and I like seeing like kids as young as Hattie and Logan about what piques their interest, what doesn't pique their interest. Like I said, she wanted to be a vet, now she wants to be a princess. Well, she can do that. She can do both.
Yeah.
But it's like I like to see these different ideas of what she could maybe be or what he could maybe be, and it's I don't know. It's really cool. It's really fun, and we're totally bought in. I'll tell you that. So we're pretty big advocates for it. So.
And it's like, I think we both have said, like, we don't understand why more people don't unschool. Like, it's so cool. It's such a great life, and just be able to see your kids play and not have any of that pressure anymore from school is such a great thing.
Especially the two little ones. I mean, they play all day long, but they're learning so much all the time. I mean, we have no fears really on it. And like I said, now we have Gavin as proof that you can actually get into college and do just fine.
Yeah.
Without having to go through all the tears and the arguments,
the heartache,
and the
all
heartache,
the stress and heartache of school. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, and you're okay now, Zach, when people ask questions?
Oh yeah, I'm a big advocate for it. I'm like I said, I shout that from the rooftop kind of thing. So, and I generally use the word self-directed education. Because like I was saying in the beginning, we had to kind of change some of the terms a little bit just to wrap your brain around it. So I use self-directed education a lot just because it's easier to explain. But I don't really even shy away from unschooling either. I just tell them that's what unschooling is.
Yeah, it's true. When I'm out and about in the world, from the time they were young till even now, I don't use the term unschooling. Most often, like when I'm just starting a conversation with someone, I'll say homeschooling. I love self-directed education, because that's becoming more and more prevalent. There's more and more of those kind of opportunities showing up around. So to meet the person where they are, not try to drag them where I already am. Because as we said in the beginning, this is a long process, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, that's very cool. I love how that kind of came full circle. Well, I want to thank you guys so much for speaking with me today. It was so much fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
We appreciate it.
Yay. Now, before we go, where's the best place for people to connect with you online?
I have a blog on Facebook called Learning at the Lake House. So people can find me there, and I share stories and articles and just talk about our unschooling journey there.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great night.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye-bye.